Good afternoon. Let's have breaking news out of Melbourne right now, where Premier Daniel Andrews is updating the state's escalating coronavirus crisis.
Of coronavirus in Victoria, that's 288 more than our last update. There's been some reconciliations, but that's the net number. 47 Victorians are in hospital, 12 are in intensive care. Of those 288 cases, and given the size of that number, the magnitude of that number, there's still the vast majority that are still being investigated by our public health team, but 26 of those are connected to contained and known outbreaks. 262 of those are still under investigation by our public health team. Those numbers will jump around a bit. There'll be linkages back to other cases, but again, that detective work has to be done first. Now, can I just highlight what I think is an equally significant number in terms of the daily update? We did 37,588 tests yesterday. That is the biggest single day of testing that has been done, and by some considerable margin. When you're looking that much, then that's the exact strategy. You're finding cases of the virus and you're able then to do the contact tracing, to take steps to limit the movement, to isolate, to take all those necessary precautions to try and make sure that positive cases and close contacts are not moving around the community. They are in fact in their home. Now, I know that there will be great concern about these numbers. People will feel particularly concerned to see that number as high as it is. I just want to remind everybody that we've been very, very clear. We didn't take the step to return to staying at home, except for the 4 reasons for metropolitan Melbourne, because the numbers were stable. We didn't take that step because we didn't have a problem. We took that step because we knew it would need to get worse before it got better, and that unless we took those steps, we simply wouldn't be able to bring a sense of control to this. We would not be able to see a stabilisation and then a driving down of those case numbers. At the same time, no one should underestimate how significant, how big a challenge that we all face. It is very significant, and that's why each of us have to play our part. So I know and understand there'll be concern across the community to see that number. I just want everyone to acknowledge a couple of points. It was always going to get worse before it got better. We're doing more testing than has ever been done, and not by a small margin, but by a massive margin. I'm very grateful to everybody who has participated in that testing program, and I would urge all Victorians follow the rules. And if you have symptoms, even mild symptoms, please come forward and get tested. That gives us the most powerful tool, a sense of where the virus is, how it is moving, and how it is we can best respond to it. Beyond that, I just want to make some quick announcements, and I'll ask Brett to add to my comments both on the epidemiology of the day and also the announcement in relation to masks. As you know, there's been for some time now, there's been a bit of debate about at what point masks become important. We think we're at a stage now, and the advice to me from the Chief Health Officer, and it's supported by AHPPC, it's supported by others, is that through an abundance of caution, through the fact that it's relatively easy, we should request of all Victorians when they are out of their home, and this relates principally to metropolitan Melbourne and Mitchell Shire, when you're out of your home for one of those 4 permitted reasons, and where you can't maintain that 1.5 metre social distance, so whether you are in an Uber or a taxi, or if you're on public transport, or many other examples, even shopping for the basics you need when you need them, either a homemade mask or another mask, and I'll come to that in a moment. It is our request of you. It's not compulsory. We're simply asking that if you can wear a mask where you can't distance, that's exactly what we would like you to do. That's a relatively small contribution, but one that can make a really big difference. Brett will speak a little bit more about the science behind this and how it is that the sorts of benefits we think that might come from this. To that end, we have, because this is not something that's going to be for a week or even 6 weeks, I think masks in those circumstances where you can't maintain distance will be a feature of our response to the pandemic for the foreseeable future, maybe many, many months. So it's not a matter of urgency, it's a matter that now's the time to move to that. Now's the time to do that common sense thing To that end, we've already begun the process of getting 2 million reusable masks made, and we will be able to then distribute those throughout the community. And in the interim, that takes a little bit of time. But again, this is not something that's a week or a month. It's going to be with us for quite some time, and we think it'll be perhaps even more important on the other side of this lockdown, as it is now. We'll also, in the interim, provide up to 1 million additional single-use masks. And I'll have more to say about how we're going to distribute those, how they'll be available. I think there are some priority groups that probably will receive those masks, those single-use masks in the first instance. There's many single-use masks that are being used now. For instance, some of the different communities we've been talking about in recent days, for instance, public housing tenants. We think that might be, there already are some masks being used there, but we might be able to take a further step in that particular environment. There'll be lots of examples like that. That's not to say that we should be compelling people. That's not to say that if you're wearing a mask, you're doing the wrong thing. We just need to be all conscious, to work together, to be as respectful of each other as we can be. It's a small thing, but our request, not an obligation, but our request is that if you are out in metropolitan Melbourne or Mitchell Shire for a lawful purpose, and you don't think you're going to be able to maintain that 1.5 metre distance in a cab, in an Uber, on public transport, maybe at the shopping centre if things were quite busy, then we would ask that you wear a mask. And it can be a homemade mask, and I think Brett will even talk to scarves and things of that nature. No mask, even surgical grade, reduces the risk of infection to zero. There's always some inherent risk. That's why it's still so important. If you're unwell, if you have symptoms, then you shouldn't be out, let alone out shopping or going about your business, even if that would be within the 4 reasons. It's really important that anybody who's sick, the only reason to leave your home is to get tested, and for no other reason until you get the results of those tests. So I appreciate and understand that there will be a sense of concern seeing those numbers. The sheer volume of testing that we're doing, I'm comforted by that. That is a massive number of tests. To get those taken and to get them processed, it means you will find more virus because we know the virus is out there across metropolitan Melbourne. The key point here, though, is to acknowledge that these numbers will need to increase. They'll need to get to a peak before it is we can stabilise them and drive them down. And the best and most appropriate response to these numbers is for all of us, our public health team, to keep working hard, and they will, thousands of them, working day and night. And secondly, the best response to these numbers and the worst numbers that are likely to follow them is for all Victorians to play their part. I know it's not easy. I know that it's not pleasant. I know it's very frustrating, and we'd all like this to be over, but we cannot ignore the reality of the circumstances we face. And if each of us work together, we'll be able to get to the other side of this, and we'll be able to begin that opening up again. Now, I might ask Brett now to speak to the numbers and the science of this, the public health of this.
That is Daniel Andrews speaking live in Melbourne with numbers this country has not seen so far in the COVID-19 outbreak. 288 confirmed cases in the last 24 hours. Let's bring in Chris O'Keefe, a 9 News reporter. Chris, good afternoon. On a world scale, put this in perspective in Australia as well.
Well, Davina, this is the worst day Australia has seen so far in this pandemic. In one state, 288 cases. The worst that we saw was in New South Wales back in March 28, where it was 212. Now, you have to remember the majority of those were from people coming in from overseas. The majority of the 288 we're seeing in Victoria at the moment, overnight. People have caught that in the community.
And that would be all of it, wouldn't it? Because the flights aren't coming into Melbourne anymore.
They haven't had a flight come in from Melbourne from overseas for more than a week now. So the vast majority of that is community transmission, and that scares the pants off people. We also saw just some international numbers. Japan, a country of 126 million, they've had just 197 cases in 24 hours. Melbourne's had almost 100 more. So
an Australian state is got a bigger issue right now than what other international countries have.
Singapore 125, Hong Kong 42. It's a diabolical situation in Victoria at the moment. We heard from the Premier, Daniel Andrews, there. He said it was always going to get worse before it got better. He's expecting worse numbers to follow. And now he's made the announcement that he's requesting all Melburnians to wear a mask if they go outside of their home in Melbourne. And he said that's not just for a couple of weeks or the 6-week lockdown that they're enduring at the moment. That is for the foreseeable future. He's just ordered 2 million reusable masks and 1 million single-use masks. So this is something that we haven't seen in Australia during the course of this pandemic. We heard the Prime Minister a short time ago say this is extremely concerning, what they're seeing out of Victoria. But I tell you what, 288 new cases in 24 hours is really bad news.
The breakdown of those numbers is particularly concerning as well. Out of that 288, just 26 come from a known outbreak. So they're investigating 262 cases where at this stage they don't know how those individuals got sick. The good news out of all of that is the rate of testing is truly extraordinary. More than 37,000 tests conducted in the last 24 hours. Does that indicate that we're going to see bad numbers in a couple of days because so many people have been tested?
Right, the more you test, the more virus you pick up. The Premier just said exactly that. And that's a byproduct of what we're dealing with here. So I think that's a good number, 37,500 tests, fantastic. You will pick up more cases over the next few days because as these roll in, the lag period means people will test positive. So 288, whilst a shocking number today, it will get worse.